Well, hello everybody. Good morning or good evening, good afternoon. Depends on where you are at the moment. Please welcome Steve Rogers from South Africa and from the right person, the right job. He will join us today and explain the 10 most important habits and behaviors and skills of the Chief Marketing Officer. My name is Michiel van der Watering from the Netherlands, running a business called Accountable Marketing Expert, where I work with companies to make marketing accountable for. And before we go to Steve, let me just introduce the reason why it became also important to become accountable, and why do you need a chief marketing officer who is accountable as well. And if you look on the internet, you see numerous research stating the accountability and the importance of accountability in marketing. And there are just a couple of highlights that I took out from it. And if you have no accountability, you probably will have face a very low return on investment in marketing, the technology, innovation, and growth, because you don't have a clue where to invest in, which innovations, which growth, and which technology. And you probably will be disrupted by your competitors, very effective and accountable marketeers who know much better what they are doing when they're running their marketing strategies. And then, of course, the CMO will suffer personally and professionally, but personally as well, because we see that CMOs are, well, if I may say so, being bullied by their colleagues as you're spending, or actually you're wasting the company's money on marketing, but what do you bring in? What do you bring on the table? So accountable marketeers, whatever their function title is, they have better returns and they have much higher level of growth performance because they know where the growth of their market is. And if you're more like into graphs, you see here how the marketing budget allocations across major resources are, and this is coming from Gartner Insights. And you see that a lot of technology, a lot of marketing budget has been invested in marketing technology. And if you look another research report as well, you see that we are training, upscaling the existing marketing tech talent. So we need more technology within our marketing team, and we need more integration between marketing and all kinds of technology solutions, so that our marketeers do not have to bother about how to run their administration of their campaigns. And the last one is we really need to look in the market to find and recruit marketing technology talent. And that's where Steve is about. So he will take it away from us and explain the top 10 items that are very important to have an accountable marketing officer within your team. So go ahead, Steve.
Thanks, Michiel. Thanks very much. I'll just turn on sharing. Okay, is that clear?
Yep.
Right, great. We're going to walk through a number of behaviors and habits this afternoon. For marketing people, this can be quite a different language to what they're used to, because marketers obviously talk in terms of advertising, marketing, budgets, above the line, below the line, whereas we in the HR space are concerned about job person fit, we're concerned about team person fit, and we want to make sure that we've got the right people on the bus to deliver the business plan. So our job as HR people is to assist marketers to make sure they've got the right people in the teams that they belong to. So today we'll talk about the top 10 behaviors and habits of accountable CMOs, and we'll start off right away. Okay, it was quite interesting. Michiel sent me an article a few days ago written by a chap called Tony Kavanagh on Insightly's website, and he spoke about the changing environment of the CMO's job. And he mentioned a couple of things: to know your customer, to choose the right tech, to craft your playbook, and to integrate with other departments, which is all fine. But the one that interested me from an HR perspective was the last one, which is to assemble a team of athletes. Now, I don't think that Tony meant a real team of athletes, rugby players and cricket players. I think he meant marketers, obviously. And I read the article below that heading, and he talked about the key is to hire the right people for every role. And it's quite interesting. Even in the last British election, they spoke about this issue after the election. And the Prime Minister said, our job is to put the right people in the right jobs across the UK. which is very interesting to hear that kind of language coming from people who are not related to human resources. So, but this is not a recruitment 101 webinar where we talk about defining jobs, searching for people, assessing people, and then selecting a final candidate. No, that's a topic for another day. We want to focus today on the topic of capability. And there are a number of different types of capability which are easy to define initially, but get more complicated as we go down the list. So the first one, which everybody is familiar with, is qualifications. Most people have the qualifications listed on their CVs, and with a bit of luck, those qualifications are relevant to the job that they're applying for. So if I'm a CMO and I'm applying for a job as a CMO, I'm hoping to have some form of commercial degree with a marketing specialization or a specific marketing a diploma or a marketing course behind me, which assists me as part of my job to be CMO. At the level of CMO, I might also have an MBA or another kind of management degree, which assists me from a general management perspective. But qualifications are simple. We look at them on the CV, we find them, we list them, and we decide whether or not they're appropriate. The second issue is experience. And this, again, is quite straightforward. We find experience on the CV. It appears in three kinds of experience. Firstly, industry experience. Do I come from this industry? Second of all, functional experience. So in the marketing context, do I have a strong background and history in the marketing function? And then thirdly, what level of experience do I have? Am I working at a CMO level? Am I a more junior person hoping to rise to CMO? Or am I a seasoned veteran who's been in marketing leadership positions for many years? So those first two factors are quite straightforward, and we can identify them and define them quite quickly. But when we get to the third one, functional competencies, now the game starts getting a bit more vague, because functional competencies are often not defined through a job analysis process. They're defined by a line manager sitting in an office with an HR person and a couple of colleagues saying, well, the person must have Microsoft Office, or they must have marketing experience. They must have marketing competencies on, say, for example, CRM software. And some of those are easy. So CRM software or Microsoft Office, that's easy. But when it gets to other competencies, for example, to build and motivate a team, which is a very important functional competency for a CMO, then things get a bit more difficult. But the journey is not even halfway finished yet, because we move on from functional competencies to evidence of past performance. Again, this is a very subjective area. We might, for example, look for certificates and awards which have come from the person's CV. So we make an assumption that if they won a number of awards, they are probably good people. Or we might look at achievements listed on their CVs. So, for example, they got the marketing award for the year from the Association of Marketers. We might find that their internal awards from the companies that have rewarded them for marketing excellence. We don't know, but it's still a bit subjective. We don't know exactly what the standard is when people talk about their past performance.
Maybe I can add something to that, Steve.
Sure.
When we look at all kinds of competitions there are in the world for the CMO or the Marketeer of the Year, and then you see more and more that, well, when you have been selected as a potential Marketeer of the Year or CMO of the Year, then we also see some evidence about the past performance, because that's where the jury are looking for, and the requirements most of the time come back in their reports.
Okay, great. That's perfect. If there is industry-specific experience of the past performance, and that can be documented and added to a CV, that makes it a lot easier to assess people's past performance and also their functional competencies.
Yeah.
Thank you. The next is the interview. Obviously, if we're hiring a CMO, then the first time we look at that person, meet them, have a discussion either informally or formally through the interview process. If it's a well-structured interview, that also makes a difference. If the questions have been carefully decided upon, that makes a difference. But a lot of the time, people use their gut feel to come to a conclusion about the quality of an interview. Now, the example I thought about this afternoon as we were preparing was that if someone said to me personally, would you invest in the UK after Brexit? My gut feel is largely irrelevant. We don't know how competent I am. We don't know what I know about Brexit. And therefore, taking my opinion for granted might be a waste of time. The same thing in the interview. Some people have a certain level of gut feel about a candidate in the interview, but if that person is not skilled at understanding people, then the interview process can be largely subjective. The next step is to introduce assessments, simulations, and case studies. These are generally focused on the industry of the individual. So, for example, if I'm in the timber industry and I'm becoming a CMO in that timber industry, then we might want to understand, does the CMO understand the timber industry and understand the market forces that are making a difference to competitors in the industry? And so we might present a timber case study and ask him to present on the competitive issues and present that analysis in a 15-minute section of the interview. And then lastly, gut feel. I think gut feel is next. So gut feel is not just in the interview. Sometimes people read a CV or they talk to somebody on the phone or they have an interview and they have a gut feel that somebody fits the environment. And gut feel is important. We must never ignore gut feel, but we must ask the question, are we qualified to use our gut feel? Okay, so those are the starting points. But there are two more which we need to understand in a lot more detail, because these two factors make a difference to the person sticking to the organization and performing long term. The first one is our behavior, and the second is our habits. We've all heard the quotes from Aristotle, that we are what we do. And so if we do, excellence is an act that we repeat on a regular basis. So therefore, if my habits are weak or strong, that makes a difference to how I perform. If I'm extroverted or introverted, confident or cooperative, that makes a difference to how I perform in any particular job. And this area is my specific interest. So you'll often find, people often send me a job description and they'll say to me, could you go through the job description and tell us how you would go about hiring a person for this particular role? And so you often find that there are phrases in the market, in the job description, which sound fine. For example, this one, working to build or maintain friendly, warm relationships or a network of contacts with others. That sounds like a fair thing to do for sales, marketing, operation, leadership generally. That seems like a good idea. Secondly, I must be able to work under pressure. This is a very, very common favorite of CVs. Everybody thinks that everybody has to work under pressure. But in actual fact, there are a very small minority of jobs that require us to work under pressure. And they are generally at senior levels like the CMO. Thirdly, we need to have confidence in our own abilities. We need to perform and achieve without outside assistance. Now, again, that sounds great. Yes, it makes sense. We should have confidence. But the key question that starts coming up in my mind is, how are we measuring this? And most of the time, there's no effort made to measure this kind of thing. The same thing with influencing others. These are just simply nice to have motherhood and apple pie kind of sayings. So what's the problem? Well, very simply, it's measurement. We can say whatever we like in the job description, but if we can't measure the job description and therefore we can't measure the candidate for the job, then obviously we're simply putting words into a document that don't mean much.
And in this case, very interesting, because the accountability of marketing, which we're talking about, is all about measurement. So if we even can't measure the job descriptions, then how can we measure then what's the outcome of the job? Exactly.
And that's often another area of major importance, is that the KPIs inside a job description are phrased in general language. So when it comes to a performance contract, that performance contract is vague. And so then we find ourselves in a difficult labor relations situation, simply because we don't have proper documentation of each job. And we can't hold people responsible for the work they're supposed to do. Okay, so now obviously in this particular example, I've given you a radical example just to make it simple. Measurement for this job could be very simple. If that's the person I want, I'm looking for a sumo wrestler, and then a ballet dancer happens to apply for the job and says, pick me, I'm very keen, then we know very quickly that that doesn't make sense. We don't even need to measure. We can simply look at that ballet dancer and say, listen, you may be a fantastic ballet dancer, but you're not likely to be a great sumo wrestler. That's easy. It gets more complicated when we start looking at people as just simple human beings who are dressed up for an interview. This individual, for example, who looks quite smart in his blue jacket and brown shirt, But do we know if he has any capability to work and build strong relationships with the media, marketing suppliers, and colleagues? And the answer obviously is no. Do we think he's capable of building and motivating the sales and marketing team? We don't know. Being insensitive to criticism when he's brainstorming new marketing ideas. We don't know. So there are three problems with those statements. First of all, there's no objective understanding of those words. So the person who wrote the job description is often using their language that they've built over time. And then when they leave the company, the job description stays behind, but the individual is left. And then the next person takes it over, and so we go. Number two, we don't often try to use assessments to measure subjective variables. We make the assumption in the job description, but when it comes to candidates arriving at our companies, we don't assess them for those subjective items. And then number three, they're often opinion-based. So the chief executive has decided that the CMO should be X and Y, but that's his decision, it's his opinion, and it may be because he was a CMO in years past. But the fact of the matter is, it's opinion-based. So we need to be able to define and measure job-related behaviors and team-related habits. These are very important issues, and the subjectivity we've spoken about for a few minutes is what we need to eliminate. So why is it important to measure job-related behaviors? Well, these are the behaviors that we use as individuals in the jobs that we do all the time at work. They are relevant to performance. And if we do things we hate doing, that becomes a source of frustration. And as a result of that, we probably resign at some point in time. Example, if I place a shy, reserved, cooperative, and risk-averse person into a marketing promotions role in a competitive market, I am setting that person up for failure. And we've all seen it at different times. If you've been to a shopping center and a company is running a promotion, some of those promoters are sitting on their cell phones, and some of those promoters are out chatting to the people. I guarantee you, from a behavioral perspective, unless they're lazy, but from a behavioral perspective, the people who are talking to people are the more extroverted, outgoing, confident souls, and the people who are on their cell phones are hating every second of their job.
So this is quite a challenge when it comes to hiring the new CMO, becoming or even creating an accountable marketing department, where the CMO in question doesn't like to crunch numbers. That
Yes.
will be a challenge then, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, if I'm a person who likes to see the big picture, I'm not interested in the data. I use my gut feel. I find the detail actually a bit boring, and I prefer to delegate the detail lower down. And I don't pay attention even to highline results. So I believe in my gut feel. That CMO could be incredible. They may be geniuses, but the likelihood is they skate over the detail because they don't like the detail.
Yeah. And there's the devil, right?
Exactly. The devil is in that detail.
Yeah.
Then the second type, the team-related habits, exactly the same story. When a CMO joins a company, he's not just joining a generic company. He's joining a marketing team with a bunch of people with specific habits that they bring to work every day. If that marketing team has been together for quite a long time, there's a fair chance that they've set a standard of habits within the team. If the CMO arrives with a very, very different set of habits and doesn't understand the team, doesn't like the team, then that person becomes a source of frustration for the team, or the team find him frustrating. So, for example, if I place an individualistic, analytical, task-oriented, and detail-missing person, so in other words, I don't like the detail, and I put them into a customer, media, agency-facing role, I will expect drama over the next couple of months. Okay. So, what's happened to my slide? Okay, there we go. So it makes sense then that we need to be able to define and measure job-related behaviors and team-related habits. But how? Which is the obvious question. Well, what we do in South Africa and what we do also in other countries around the world is we try to use simple, time and cost-efficient, job-relevant tools. So we use two tools in this context, the PPA and a tool called Shadow Match. I'll come back to the detail of those shortly. But this is not to suggest that there are not other tools in the marketplace. There are hundreds of tools, and some people will have great success with different tools. And we certainly don't worry about which company has which tool. we ask a simple question. Is the tool measuring the job effectively? And is the tool measuring the individual in the job effectively? If it is, there's nothing to argue about. It's a good tool. Okay, so the first one, the PPA, stands for the Personality Profile Analysis. It's a tool which helps us to understand the fit of people to their jobs. And what we do is we go through a 24-question process to map the behaviors for any particular job, and it creates a graphical response. Then on the other side of the coin, if we're, for example, doing a marketing job like CMO, then we want to profile the CMO to see if his behaviors make sense in the context of the job. So it's a very simple job person fit process. Our job is to try and make sure that if these are two pieces of a jigsaw, the job and the person, that we put the right person in the right job. So that's job-related behaviors. The team-related behaviors are run by a tool called Shadow Match. And what we've done with Shadow Match is that we're no longer looking at the job itself compared to the CMO. Now we're looking at the context in which the CMO needs to operate. So if I'm the CMO in this case, I want to know, am I joining a bunch of people behind those glass doors that I can relate to, that I can work with, and that I can build? Because as the CMO, obviously my job is to build and motivate that team to produce awesome results. If I can't do that because I don't understand those people, my habits are different, my conceptual fitness is different, and even my behaviors in terms of the job are different, then it becomes tough for this individual to succeed. Okay, so what is marketing context? Marketing context is created by the people inside the company. Obviously, we can't measure the walls, we can't measure the computers, we can't measure the function. What we can do, though, is measure the people inside the marketing function with whom the marketing director needs to work successfully all the time. So, for example, at a top level, we might want to understand, what does the C-suite person look like? What does the general manager look like in that marketing function? Or we might even say, if it's a smaller company, let's take all the C-suite people and all the general managers across all functions and create a behavioral benchmark for that particular level of job. Or we can go a bit further down. We could, for example, talk to profit and loss owners across the business and the CMO and ask a question, is there a particular kind of habit profile that's relevant at this level? Or thirdly, we can go down to the actual team itself. And here we might combine marketing and sales. We might combine anybody involved with things like promotions, fulfillment, media houses, and so on, anybody involved with that function. And we might say, let's build a general profile first. And then secondly, let's build a specific profile of the people with whom the CMO must work successfully.
Yeah. I really relate to this approach, because the CMO really has to cooperate with the general management. And most of the time that is an issue, where the CMO doesn't speak the language of the CEO and the CFO. But on the other hand, he also has to understand the problems and challenges that sales have and cooperate with them. And the profit and loss owners are just like, if there's a business unit within your company, and the profit and loss owners need to cooperate with the CMO, because marketing stands for the two words market getting. And that's what the CMO is supposed to do: get the market for the profit and loss owners, and also get it for the general management.
Yeah.
Really nice. Yeah.
And if that marketing director doesn't have his operational team on site, in other words, the operations and factory of the organization don't believe the marketing is working properly, and they don't believe the marketing function is responsive, then you can get active opposition to the marketing. And
absolutely.
That becomes a major conflict.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, so the marketing team, for example, could be a bunch of people who work self-confidently. They might be altruistic. They might be innovative and open to change. They could be problem simplifiers and solvers. They might be self-motivated. They could handle frustrating circumstances well. They might manage conflict to a positive conclusion. That might be the context for the marketing team if I'm the CMO joining that team. Now, if I happen to have a bunch of habits that are very different to that, then the likelihood is I'm not going to fit and I'm not going to last.
And
now,
this also appears for a marketing team that has to change. So you're describing here the marketing team as it is.
Yes.
But
correct.
We might even have a team which is not fitting for the new age of marketing.
That's correct. Yeah, so it's in that particular context, then we'd look at the fit of each person in the context to the general benchmark, and we'd ask the question, where are the performance failures currently? So let's say, for example, the sales team said that the marketing is out of touch with the market. Then we need to say, well, who's responsible for developing that strategy? And is that person problematic? Now, remember, they might not be problematic from a behavior perspective. They might simply be poor marketers. We don't know. But we look at the data. We build up a CV understanding of the individual. We build up a behavioral understanding and a track record understanding in order to say the problem seems to lie here. And then we develop that individual either out of the business or up into the business in a better fashion.
Great. Yeah.
Most of the time, the problem I find in human resources and training generally is that the training tends to be one size fits all. So you don't tend to have a variety of solutions which are customized to the needs of a particular department. So everybody goes for a management development course. We all attend the same thing, regardless of whether or not we need it. And that to me is problematic because we're not focusing on the individual requirement to improve performance. Okay. All right. Then another marketing context, which could be very different to the last one, could be this one here, where, for example, this individual, this group of individuals might hand off on a regular basis. They might be individually inclined, so they don't really like working as a team. They might ignore conflict. They might act outside of structures without discipline. They might not be resilient. They might be more task than people inclined. They might even avoid change. So if I'm a new CMO coming into an environment where the marketing people look like this, I am walking into a difficult environment, which may prove to be my undoing, unless I understand that environment and unless I partner with human resources and training to develop the capability of that marketing team. Okay, so let's go into a bit more detail. So the PPA, which stands for Personality Profile Analysis, is a 4-factor tool, and it allows us to measure 4 areas of personality. The pictures themselves describe quite simply for you what that position is about. So the dominance profile is a profile where I want to assert myself on people and things. I have a need to lead and direct things. The compliance profile says I will comply with my environment. I will deliver work of quality and detail. The influencing profile, typically associated with marketing and sales and service, is a profile where I want to persuade people to walk with me down the road. And then the steadiness profile, which can also work in partnership with compliance, is that I do the same kind of work on a daily basis. So, for example, a doctor will see 20 patients today. Tomorrow, he's likely to see 20 patients again. He needs to have a personality that allows him to steadily work at what he needs to do on a daily basis. Okay? That's the first tool. The second tool is Shadow Match. This is just an example of a profile. There's no specific reason for this particular profile, but it does come from a marketing leader who managed to quintuple his business over a period of 5 years. So he was very successful at driving and building the marketing of petrochemicals in Africa. Okay, so there are 20 habits that we measure around the Shadow Match wheel, and I'll just go through 2 examples of those habits. So, for example, the simplification habit is about the habit of breaking complex scenarios down to linear challenges that can easily be solved. So what a lot of people do is they go straight from receiving a problem to problem solving. They don't first simplify the problem in order to make it easier to solve the problem. So if you skip the simplification step, it means that you're not terribly interested in the bigger picture of breaking a problem down into its constituent pieces. The second one is leadership. This is a derived habit. It doesn't just come from itself. It comes from a number of habits such as resilience, discipline, team orientation, and the propensity to act immediately, and self-confidence with an attitude of positive involvement to lead a group of people towards a successful outcome. I know that's a big mouthful, but it summarizes leadership quite nicely. And that is one of 20 habits that Shadow Match is measuring.
Great.
So in total then, combined with the Shadow Match tool and the PPA tool, we have 24 behavioral characteristics that we can measure with these 2 tools. And that gives us a useful and stable background to measure performance and behavior consistently over time. Okay, so let's take a few examples. If my job is to lead the marketing team in a self-confident and responsive way, what might be important on Shadow Match? So the first one would be leadership. That's an important aspect, obviously. The second would be self-confidence. That would be an important aspect of working in a self-confident way. And responsiveness would be important. Responsiveness in this case is my get up and go. It's not about speed specifically. It's about taking action on what I need to get done. Then in terms of the PPA, we measure the level of confidence this person possesses as a natural attribute. We also look at their people orientation, and we look at their speed. Are they people who like to respond quickly? So responsiveness here is about action, and this low factor of S down here is about speed. Okay. A second example, if I need to develop and change the marketing function innovatively, then what might be important? Then logically, innovation, which is one of the habits we measure. The propensity to change would also be important. My confidence to do that. If I don't have the confidence to change the function, I'm not going to change it. And then down here, my lack of interest in the past, my interest in the future is what I'm focused on. And the low C profile is a profile that says, I'm not terribly concerned about risk. I'm prepared to try new ideas. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That's fine. My confidence will see me through. I will get things done urgently, and I'll make sure that I cover the big picture. That's the second example. And then the third, to simplify a marketing strategy. So there's one simple attribute from Shadow Match to measure there, and that is the habit of simplification. Do I first of all build the big picture? Do I break it down into its constituent pieces before I go into a problem solving and strategizing approach? If I do that, that's helpful in terms of simplifying the marketing strategy. Again, the confidence factor rises up sharply here. If I don't have the confidence in myself to do the work, if I feel that I have to follow other people, there's a chance that I may or may not simplify the strategy according to whether or not I follow other people. And then the same factors apply again. Am I urgent to get this done? Do I move with speed? And am I prepared to look at the bigger picture without worrying about the detail? If I worry consistently about the detail, the problem with that is that I can't get away from the detail. I can't see the big picture. And then a final example, if I need to delegate to marketing colleagues effectively, how do I do that? Well, the propensity to hand off can be important. A lot of the time in Shadow Match, and I've made this mistake myself, is that we often focus on this habit over here called propensity to own. And that sounds like a good thing. I own my work. I take charge of my work. I deliver my work. Yeah. But as a CMO, that's not necessarily good, because as the CMO, I need to delegate to others. I need to hand off work to other people. And if I don't do that effectively, I run the danger of having a huge in tray and a very small out tray.
Yeah.
Similarly, again, I must have the confidence to delegate. If I don't confidently delegate to people, they might not accept my delegation, and they might not act as if I am in charge as the CMO. And this is a key issue. We often see it where the leader of a function, including marketing, if that person doesn't have authority in that function, then the staff don't follow that individual, and that becomes problematic over time.
Absolutely, yeah.
And secondly, in terms of the detail again, if I am comfortable to lose the detail, it makes it easier for me to delegate to other people, because quite frankly, I don't want to get into the detail. So if I can delegate that and lose it until there's a follow-up, then that makes me happy as an individual. Okay, so those are just a couple of examples. Obviously, there are lots and lots of options with Shadow Match, given that there are 24 factors we're looking at for both the PPA and Shadow Match. But it gives you an idea that if we look at a marketing function for any organization, we can build an understanding of the strength of that marketing function as it stands, and we can compare any individual in the team to the general habits of the team. And specifically, we can benchmark the CMO versus his colleagues, either at a one layer down level or the entire team. And that becomes very useful to gather insights for the marketing people. Absolutely. Okay, so to summarize this then, we've got a CMO. This may be an applicant, or it could be an existing staff member. He is sitting inside a marketing job, and that marketing job sits inside a marketing context. that context could be as big as the entire company. For example, if you're a 10-man company, then you might say, listen, we need a benchmark for the entire team, and the marketing person fits into that entire team. Or if it's a huge organization, we may only work with a particular marketing department in a particular part of the world. So we don't copy these habits across the world. We will find differences between Africa and America, or Europe and China. We'll find differences in how people do things. And it's often the case that an American person can come to Europe and struggle, and a European person can go to America and struggle. So it's important to understand the context that we're going into. In order to solve this problem, we use the PPA as a simple tool to understand the fit between the job and the person. And this is literally a 10-minute survey. And then second of all, we use Shadow Match to understand the context. And that is about a 30-minute to 60-minute survey, which enables us to understand what's going on inside the marketing function. All right, so I've used these tools for the last 11 years. And I found them tremendously useful to understand the context of a team. Just yesterday, I was working with a client who are in the business of training and development, and they are wanting to grow their organization. They want to sell a lot more courses, not just in South Africa, but they want to also launch into Africa generally. One of the problems they've got, though, is that one of their executives has what we call an absence of habits. That person means that they don't have a particular way of operating. They tend to operate purely whatever they are doing at that time, that's what they're doing. They don't necessarily have a set of habits that they replicate on a daily basis. The difficulty for that person is that that person might find it difficult to sustain action, to sustain activity. Take, for example, if I want to run a marathon, I have to sustain the practicing of running on a daily basis for a long time until I can run a marathon. And that's how habits work. They enable us to take action in our environment. So what I found is that over the years, looking at the CMO position and looking at other senior roles at a ManCo level or an ExCo level, the following 10 habits and personality characteristics I find are very useful in understanding what's going on in that department. The first, unsurprisingly, is leadership. So we spoke about that just now. If the CMO cannot lead that function, if the CMO cannot take charge of his relationships with sales, operations, general management, and finance, if he can't represent the marketing function to the board to get approval for budgets and so on, if he can't effectively present the ROI at the end of a year, then that CMO will find himself getting less budget in following years, and that's problematic.
Yeah, it's great that this is number one because, as you say, the CMO has to cooperate with other departments, and other departments might think of have the assumption of marketing they're just wasting the company's budget. So we really need a strong leader for marketing to lead a new team towards a new way of working, being accountable for what they're doing, and being able to prove and present their added value to the company's bottom line. And you really need a leader to accomplish that. Yeah, it's really great.
Okay, 100%. Thank you. The second is conceptual fitness. Now, conceptual fitness varies from place to place, and it doesn't necessarily need to be low or high, but we need to understand it. So when a team has a low conceptual fitness, that team is inclined to work with what they know. They solve problems that they know about. They don't necessarily stretch themselves away from the daily work into looking at innovative ways to do new marketing. So they are fairly comfortable. They might have a comment, for example, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So they might, for example, repeatedly take out advertising campaigns with different media, when in actual fact, we've moved on from doing that kind of campaign. And there's a need for digital marketing strategy or a media marketing strategy, which is very different to the past.
Yeah.
So we find that people with a high level of conceptual fitness, they are people who enjoy solving problems. They enjoy creating new solutions, and they tend to be proactively forward-looking as CMOs. The third one is self-confidence. This, again, it relates directly to leadership. If I work self-confidently, if I produce work in a self-confident fashion, then people tend to listen to me. Self-confidence in this context is about putting my views on the table and standing behind a position. And then from a PPA perspective, it's about acting with confidence, standing up for what I believe in, and working to a degree quite independently of what's been done in the past. So I don't hanker after the past. I don't look for someone to lead me. I lead myself. And that's a useful trait, not just for a CMO, but for any senior management position. The fourth is responsiveness. This is very important because if you take a simple example like, let's make a cup of coffee. If I ask someone to make a cup of coffee and they say, yes, they're going to make it, but they don't make it, that person is not responsive. So it's not about speed, it's about action. Did I go to the kitchen and start the process of making the coffee? Did I eventually bring the coffee, and was the coffee served? Same thing with a marketing strategy. If someone says to me from a marketing perspective, let's investigate any new digital media that have come into the marketplace in the last 3 months, and the analyst in the marketing department says, I'll get onto that, that sounds interesting, and they leave. The CMO in that meeting might be forgiven for thinking that the analyst is going to go and do that. In 2 weeks' time, we have a follow-up meeting and we discover that no one has done anything. There's been no ownership of that idea, of that issue, and the person didn't respond. So responsiveness is about the taking of action. Number 5, innovation. This is especially important in the context of marketing, especially in the fast-changing world that we live in the fourth industrial revolution, and people are talking about the fifth industrial revolution, 2045. These are having a huge impact on how we act as buyers, as suppliers, as marketers, as business people. They're having a huge impact on how we relate to the marketplace. And things like the privacy laws that have come into the marketplace. In Europe, it's GDPR. In South Africa, POPI. And I think the Americans also have a different set of privacy issues. So it's important that we react and decide, how do we innovatively take on the market, maintain market share, and preferably grow market share by doing things differently. Innovation is a key habit. It measures my ability to think out of the box and to do things differently. Okay, number 6, my openness or my propensity for change. If I have a low habit of propensity for change, I'm very comfortable to leave things as they are. So, for example, we sometimes find that people with low conceptual fitness, low innovation, are often the same people who have low propensity for change. They like to come to the office and they like to do their work as they've always done it. If they do get asked to change something, they like to do it as part of a process, a campaign, a training course, and then they will shift direction. But they need to be formally invited to change. They don't naturally think about change themselves. So this can be frustrating for a CMO. If a CMO is working with a product staff member and he says, listen, if we can change this product slightly, we will have a much better time in the media. And if the product person says, look, it's fine, we don't need to change it, then we get into issues of conflict. So it's important that the people who develop our organizations and change our products, that those people have preferably high conceptual fitness, high innovation, and high propensity for change.
Absolutely important for the accountable CMO, because if you keep on doing your campaigns, as you have been doing them, you will keep getting the results that you were getting. It's a very famous saying, and so it should be in nature of this CMO to this propensity to change together with his leadership, showing that it's okay to change every now and then whenever needed.
Yeah, and I mean the classic example of that would be with the Kodak example.
Yeah.
When Kodak, I mean, from what I know, it was a Kodak staff member who invented the digital camera.
Absolutely.
But Kodak said, no, not for us. And that killed them. And similar things happened to companies like Olivetti as well.
Yeah.
Interesting example of the contrary of that is Nokia, who were traditionally a paper and pulp manufacturer, who decided that cell phones was interesting, and they built a very dominant cell phone. So that propensity for change, innovation, and conceptual fitness is likely to be high in companies like Nokia.
Yep.
Okay, number 7, simplification. Simplification ties in very nicely with innovation, with conceptual fitness and self-confidence. If I look at a problem and say, gosh, this is interesting, how can I tackle this problem? I'm in the process of simplification. If I simply walk away from the meeting where I've been delegated and I sit on my computer and I start typing slides or typing a document, I've skipped the step of simplification. The danger that I'm running is that when I present my results back to the marketing team, they might poke holes in my work because I didn't simplify the work first of all. So simplification, together with conceptual fitness and problem solving, these are key and important habits for the CMO. Number 8, effective delegation. I've changed the word slightly there. The actual habit is propensity to hand off. This is my preparedness to give work away, to delegate. And it's about effective delegation. Effective means that I delegate to the people who can do the work. And number 2, I follow up timeously, either personally or through some of my people. But as a CMO, I cannot afford to abdicate a marketing plan or a marketing strategy to other people in the team without effective delegation.
That's another one I really like, because we're looking for accountability of marketing. We're looking at increasing the effectiveness of marketing. And so if I have a marketing leader who's able to delegate his work and delegate the marketing campaigns and part of the strategies to his team members in an effective way, that is absolutely going to help to increase the marketing effectiveness. Yeah, great one.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, and then number 9 is frustration handling. Now, number 9 and 10 are birds of a feather in one way, but they're quite different. And in fact, let me put up both 9 and 10. So people think that the two are interchangeable, but the difference between the two is that my ability to handle frustration is about handling things that go wrong. And the emphasis is on things and that go wrong. Whereas conflict handling is a people activity. So if I discover that I've got a conflict happening between my media house, my agency, and some of my staff, my job as CMO is to get into the middle of that conflict, understand it, and resolve it amicably for all parties. However, an example of frustration handling might be that we built a campaign. The campaign was supposed to go from the 8 o'clock news. It's supposed to go through a call to action via a call center. When the calls went to the call center, they didn't have capacity to handle the calls, and the call center fell over.
Yeah.
That's frustrating. That's a frustrating situation. Some people will throw their toys. Some people will scream and shout and go mad. And that doesn't necessarily solve the problem. Other people will think quite quickly how they can create a solution for that call center. And if they're very well organized, they might have a backup plan for that call center. So, and that, by the way, that particular example happened to me about 20 years ago, where we had adverts running on the national television, and it came down to fulfillment via the call center, and the call center couldn't handle it. So that's a very personally frustrating situation. Anyway, so those are the two types of handling we need to do. Can I handle frustration, which is about things? And the second is about conflict. Do I handle the conflict happening in my team? Not in a way that says I must bow down to anybody, but in a way that says we resolve the conflict. It doesn't mean we give in. It doesn't mean we give up, but it does mean that we work out how to get the people on side to keep the marketing team tight. So those are the 10 habits that we see as important for CMOs in executing their job successfully. And that's me, Michiel.
Yeah, that's a wonderful job. Thank you very much, Steve, for explaining those to us. And I've got a couple of questions coming from the chat box. And
Sure.
the first one, let me shoot just from top to bottom, is so we talked about CMO, but how does this apply to, for say, marketing analyst?
Okay, that's a good question. So the marketing analyst is typically reasonably opposite to the CMO. So for example, take the habit of a handoff. You don't want your marketing analyst to hand off. You want the marketing analyst to own that work. So the propensity to hand off or own work, those are twin habits and they are opposite. You also want your marketing analysts to be very disciplined and to build routines around their work. So the CMO at his level, obviously the CMO has the requirement of discipline and routines, but they're not key. For the analyst, they are key. If I'm investigating 10,000 records inside a database and I'm looking for trends, if I'm sloppy with my disciplines and I don't have data routines in order to analyze data effectively, then I run the risk of missing important insights, which might come out later because our competitors spotted them and we didn't spot them. So in terms of the PPA tool, the requirement would be to be more cooperative, task-focused, more patient, calm and methodical, and much more detail-oriented. We want the analyst to pick up things that the CMO would possibly completely miss, but the CMO is not supposed to be looking at the detail. The marketing analyst is.
All right. So there's another question. When a marketing organization is required to shift towards an accountable way of working, should you suggest rather to start with the team or with the management of marketing?
Fundamentally with the management first. The management of a marketing function or any function sets the tone. So if that marketing function leadership is not properly peopled, so we don't have the right people in the right jobs at that level, then fiddling with other jobs lower down is pointless initially. You could, of course, start with both of them, but I always recommend that we go down by layer. So we start with the most senior people, establish what's happening at the senior level, and then cascade downwards.
Okay, that's great. Then there's another question. You've been talking about the top 10 behaviors and skills of accountable CMO. That might be considered the new school CMO. What do you consider to be the most important differences with a so-called old school CMO?
Okay, so the differences are fairly straightforward because the modern CMO, and then this applies again across quite a few management functions, you're required to be a lot more flexible, innovative, and less rule-bound. So take a simple thing like paper media. In the old days, you knew that you placed an advert in a newspaper. The newspaper had a certain level of readership, and it was quite predictable. You weren't entirely sure exactly how it was all working, but you knew that if you placed an advert in a newspaper, there would be some form of response. The digital media of the modern age is a completely different animal. It requires a much more innovative and conceptually different approach, and it requires you to move much faster. So whereas 30, 40 years ago, you might have gone with an advertising campaign in a newspaper for 6 months, nowadays, you might be doing a marketing campaign via digital media for 3 days before you switch. So you need to be agile. You need to get rid of the old rules. You need to accept that there are marketing principles, but they are not marketing rules. So it means your approach has to be conceptually fit. You must be comfortable to simplify. You must be comfortable to solve problems. And you must attempt to lead your organization with confidence in stuff that's not necessarily documentable. So you're leading them, but you're not necessarily sure where your destination is. So it's very important that your leadership and your self-confidence is strong.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Steve, for this top 10. And I've got a tip for the attendees. Besides this very valuable top 10 of Steve, go to Google and search for CMO of the Year. And then you will find all kinds of requirements for CMOs of the Year. And they will meet a lot of the things that Steve explained to us. So how can you be of service to the attendees when they want to change their way of working and marketing towards an accountable way? What can you offer them?
Well, it's quite straightforward. The issue is understanding people individually. So often there's a tendency for people to look at a department and for staff members who are involved with training, organization development, and human resources to treat people as a group instead of as a bunch of individuals. So for me, organizational development in any function starts from the point of view of saying, do we have the right people in the right jobs? Do we understand our people? And are they in the right slots for their particular set of talents? So for any marketing department, if I was talking to a CMO who's watching this exercise and they wanted to tackle a project, I would suggest to them that we benchmark their environment and then we compare individuals to that benchmark and try to understand the differences. And that's a very straightforward, easy project to do.
And I would like to add to that, as I learned that marketing does not get the appreciation as they often fail to prove and present the return on investment, the added value, the brand value, etc. So I think would it be very much into the interest of a couple of the attendees maybe to have a pre and post ROI process to increase marketing effectiveness and the appreciation. And if you look at the slide that I've just presenting here is in short, it's the marketing process going from left to right. You need a business strategy, you need to organize your company, and then you have the marketing function. And the most important outcome of the marketing function is what we call campaigns, whether it's a business event, email campaign, television ads, or whatever. And there comes in, and we'll enlarge it a little bit, there comes in the idea of pre and post ROI, so the return on investment of your marketing campaigns. And if you're able to measure the return on investment, then over time, then you will be able to predict the return on investment at forehand, which we call the pre-ROI. So you run your campaigns in three ways. Either you want to keep the customers much longer, so the lifetime value should go up, or you would like to increase the number of customers, so you need more customers, or you would like to increase the share of wallet, meaning that your customers take more of your products for their needs. So I will share some details later in the replay and in the mail, where you can find more information about a short online course to run your own pre and post return on investment for marketing, and then you'll be able to present at forehand your marketing results and prove them afterwards. So thanks a lot for watching us here on this webinar, and I'm really looking forward to have any questions later on if you reach out by mail or by LinkedIn, and we will be happy to answer to them. So thanks again very much, Steve, for joining us here in this webinar, and we probably will meet again here online.
Great, thanks very much.